By 1453, calling the Byzantine Empire an empire was being generous. It was less a sprawling superpower and more a historical souvenir. For over 1,000 years, it had been the Eastern Roman Empire, the glittering heart of Christendom. Now, it was basically just the city of Constantinople and its immediate suburbs. Its emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, had the deeply unfortunate job of ruling a living museum piece surrounded by the rapidly expanding Ottoman Empire. It was like being the world's most dedicated curator of a single exhibit while a demolition crew is buying the land your museum is on. You have to admire the optimism. Enter Sultan Mehmed II. He was 21 years old, brilliant, and absolutely, pathologically obsessed with taking Constantinople. While most guys his age were figuring out their life goals, Mehmed's was clear: conquer the unconquerable city. His father had tried and failed, which for Mehmed was basically a dare. He had reportedly been obsessed with the city since childhood, studying its defenses and history with the kind of focus most people reserve for celebrity gossip. History is full of ambitious young men with access to far too many resources, and the results are rarely peaceful. Mehmed was about to become the poster child for it. In 1452, Mehmed decided to build a castle on the European side of the Bosphorus Strait, directly opposite one his great-grandfather had built. The Byzantines watched this happen. This new fortress, Rumelihisar, was nicknamed Boğazkesim, which adorably translates to the throat cutter. It was built in about 4 months, a record-breaking pace that screamed, "I am not here to make friends." Constantine XI sent polite, diplomatic notes protesting the new, extremely large, cannon-filled fortress being built in his front yard. These complaints were filed, presumably, in a bin labeled "Suggestions from Future Subjects." Now, let's talk about the superweapon. A Hungarian engineer named Orban had a brilliant idea for a monstrously huge cannon. Being a savvy businessman, he first offered his services to the Byzantines. Emperor Constantine, after checking his treasury, found he mostly had lint and unpaid bills. He couldn't afford Orban's premium rates. So Orban, in a move any modern defense contractor would applaud, went to the competition. Mehmed II not only hired him, but gave him 4 times the salary he asked for and unlimited resources. The result was the Basilic, a 27-foot-long cannon that fired 1,200 pounds stone balls. A classic lesson in what happens when you skip the expensive warranty. The odds were, to put it mildly, not great. Mehmed assembled an army estimated somewhere between 80,000 and 200,000 soldiers, including his elite janissaries. On the other side, Constantine had about 7,000 men to defend 14 miles of walls. The math is not on his side. His defense force was a motley crew of locals, supplemented by a few hundred invaluable Genoese soldiers led by a mercenary named Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, who was basically a 15th century special forces commander. There were also Venetians, Cretans, and even a rogue Ottoman prince. It was the sort of desperate, last-minute team-up you see in movies, just with a much higher chance of everyone dying horribly. To be fair, the defenders had one hell of a home field advantage: the Theodosian walls. This wasn't just a wall. It was a multi-layered masterpiece of defensive architecture that had repelled every attacker for 1,000 years. It had an outer wall, a moat, an inner, much taller wall, and towers. It was the final boss of medieval fortifications. The city's naval flank was also protected by a massive iron chain stretched across the mouth of the Golden Horn Harbor, preventing any enemy ships from getting in. For centuries, this combo was basically a cheat code for survival. The problem is, every cheat code eventually meets a player who has read the strategy guide. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman cannons opened fire. The sound was supposedly heard for miles. Orban's great cannon could only fire about 7 times a day because it would overheat and also took forever to reload. But when it hit, it punched holes in walls that had stood since the Roman Empire. The psychological impact was immense. The defenders, led by Giustiniani, became masters of overnight repair, using rubble, earth, and wooden barrels to patch the walls under the cover of darkness. It was the world's most stressful, high-stakes construction project, where failing to meet the deadline meant your city ceased to exist. No pressure. The Great Chain was working perfectly, keeping the Ottoman fleet out of the Golden Horn. Mehmed, faced with this ancient security system, came up with a solution that was completely, wildly insane. He decided to go around it, not by sea, but by land. He ordered his men to build a road of greased logs over the hill of Galata. Then, over a single night, his army and thousands of oxen physically dragged about 70 of his ships overland and slid them into the Golden Horn Harbor. Imagine being a Byzantine guard on the seawall, having a quiet night, and then seeing an entire enemy fleet appear in your supposedly secure harbor. I assume some very confused conversations took place. After weeks of siege, morale was getting shaky. On the Ottoman side, the Grand Vizier Enver Halil Pasha, who never liked this plan, was quietly suggesting they just declare victory and go home. The siege was expensive and costing lives. Inside the city, things were even worse. The defenders were exhausted and starving. Plus, they were still arguing about religion. The Orthodox Greeks deeply resented a recent, politically motivated union with the Catholic Church. One high-ranking official famously said he'd rather see the Sultan's turban in the city than the Latin mitre. It's a bold strategy to prioritize theological squabbles when an enemy army is literally tearing your walls down. By late May, Mehmed decided it was time to end it. He planned a massive 3-wave final assault for May 29th. First, he'd send in the Bashi Bazouks, his irregular, poorly equipped troops, essentially to absorb arrows and tire out the defenders. Second would be his better-trained Anatolian regiments. The final, killing blow would be delivered by his personal troops, the Janissaries, who hadn't fought yet and were completely fresh. It was a brutal, coldly logical meat grinder of a plan. At a critical moment in the fighting, Giustiniani, the heart of the defense, was badly wounded by a cannon fragment or crossbow bolt. His withdrawal from the walls, whether from pain or panic, shattered the morale of the remaining defenders. And then we come to the Kirko Porta Gate. History is filled with these moments of sublime, tragic absurdity. Amidst the chaos of the main assault, a small contingent of Ottoman soldiers discovered a postern gate, a tiny side door that had been left unlocked. Accounts differ. Maybe it was left open by retreating Genoese, maybe it was an oversight, maybe it was treachery. The result, however, was the same. A few dozen Ottoman soldiers slipped through, climbed a nearby tower, and raised the Ottoman flag inside the city walls. After 53 days of siege, a legendary defense, giant cannons, and ships dragged over a mountain, the city may have ultimately fallen because somebody forgot to lock a door. Humanity's capacity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory is truly bottomless. Seeing the enemy flag inside the city caused a complete collapse of the defense. The end was swift and brutal. Emperor Constantine XI reportedly threw off his royal insignia and charged into the fray, dying anonymously with his soldiers. His body was never definitively identified. Mehmed II, now Fatih Sultan Mehmed, the Conqueror, rode into the city later that day. He went to the Hagia Sophia, the largest church in Christendom, and ordered it converted into a mosque, a powerful symbol of the new reality. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the end of a city, it was the definitive end of the Roman Empire, a shockwave that marked the true closing of the Middle Ages. And it all came down to a 21-year-old with a dream, a giant cannon, and possibly a very poorly secured gate. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds.